Now, let's talk about reforms. About a year ago, the president did form that Presidential Committee on Tax Reforms headed by Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. And we've seen their proposals. In fact, some of them have already been being implemented. Let's keep our eyes on some of them. Now, there's the withholding tax, exempting small businesses from that. That has already been put into announcements and hopefully is being implemented as we speak. Then the consolidation of over 60 taxes and levies into 8. Mr. Oyedele has been telling us that even though we have about 60 taxes, you barely have revenue from that getting to the government's coffers. So that's why they said they want to streamline it to effective 8. Identification of high-yielding tax sources, and then proposed constitutional amendment to limit tax burden to single-digit percentage. Let's find out how far they've done with implementation of this, and we're doing that with the head of that committee, Presidential Committee on Tax Reforms, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, joins us virtually from Abuja. Mr. Oyedele, good morning, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ini, for having me.
Great. So what's the latest now? We do know about the withholding tax. We do know about the import duties being suspended for 150 days, and hopefully that's being implemented, even though, anyway, we'll get to that. But what's the latest? What's updates on the proposals, especially when we look at the proposed constitutional amendment that you want to limit tax to single digit?
Thank you very much. Yes, like you rightly said in your introductions, there's quite a lot of reforms that we are working on. And as we speak, there are different stages of implementation. Some of them have been signed, like a couple of the executive orders, including the ones on waivers of duties and VAT on food, pharmaceutical, agri inputs, and so on and so forth. We also have the withholding tax regulation, which has been signed by the Honorable Minister for Finance and Coordinating Minister for the Economy, because based on the law, that regulation is meant to be signed by the Finance Minister. So we're just finalizing the process of publishing that in the official gazette, that's the government gazette. As recent as even yesterday, we're still doing the final work on this along with Ministry of Justice, and then the publication in the official gazette is with Ministry of Information, and even this last weekend as well, we were with the Lagos State government, because some of our reforms also border on sub-national. So we had a retreat the whole of Saturday, spending time on Sunday as well. We have sent about 10 amendments to the Constitution to the National Assembly, and that includes the one you mentioned in your introduction regarding limiting the number of taxes that individuals and businesses have to pay. We feel if we can put this in the Constitution, then we'll put that problem behind us for good, forever, so that nobody will come and reverse it. We also have a few other interventions we've been able to address. Some of that include trying to create a harmonized list of taxes. Currently, we have a law that we call approved levies and taxes collectible by federal, state, and local government, which is over 60. We have now drafted a law to replace that with the total number of taxes being under 10, which is a single digit. We've also had, very interesting engagement and development around the national fiscal policy. So as we speak now, we have a national fiscal policy that has gone through all the engagements with sub-national, with private sector, with the public, with the media, analysts, and the general public. We're just waiting now the final stages for Mr. President to sign, which we are hoping will happen in the next 1 or 2 weeks. And once that document is signed, it sets the frame for our policy around taxation and more broadly revenue generation. So you don't put burden on the vulnerable people, you support businesses to grow, you don't tax investment and capital, and so on and so forth. And then we have the policy that focuses on spending. How do you prioritize your spending so that you are spending where it will matter most to the people given the level of multidimensional poverty we have in the country. So what is the priority of spending? What process should you go through? Ensuring there is citizens' participation, ensuring that there is the quality and efficiency of spending and accountability for our spending. And lastly, we have the policy around borrowing to ensure that when we do borrow, we apply it productively. And even before then, ensuring that we have terms that are favorable to the country and not putting our limited resources at risk because of various risks and terms that we seem to always get into. Overall, that national fiscal policy has an objective of ensuring fair taxation, ensuring that we have responsible spending, as well as sustainable borrowing. So overall, these are some of the developments and the status of our work as we speak.
So thank you for that. I mean, every time we have you on the program, you have a lot of updates. But what is the next implementation we can expect? Maybe for some of those reforms that you say have gone through the processes, what's the next one we should expect?
Yes. So that the next big one we should expect, I'll probably will say this is one of the most important work we have been doing, spent about a little over 1 year now, is we have redrafted, or let me put it differently, we have a proposal to repeal and redraft major tax laws, whether you're talking about companies' income tax, whether it's value-added tax, whether it's personal income tax, capital gains tax, stamp duties. These major taxes account for well over 90 to 95% of our revenue as a country, and we redrafted them because many of them are so old, there's no point trying to amend them. Like the stamp duty law is a law of 1939, before our independence, before the internet was invented. So we thought it's better to just draft it and say, if you have a brand new Nigeria today, what should be the ideal policy around taxation? So those laws have now been drafted. They've gone through all the stages that are necessary, including engagement with stakeholders, public and private sector, as well as with our international partners, learning from other countries. And those are now in a stage where we're only just waiting for the final approval from the Federal Executive Council. The lawmakers are currently on recess. So we want to be ready so that as soon as they resume by middle of September, we're able to present those bills to them. And we're very positive because we've been engaging with them as well, the lawmakers, I mean, that this should be able to get out of the National Assembly and being passed within a matter of 1 month to 1.5 months for the president to then assent. And we then hope to spend the rest of the year trying to build capacity, creating awareness, allowing everybody to adjust their systems where they have to. And for many of these reforms to then take effect from January 2025, which is when the people will begin to see the real impacts of the various reforms that we have been undertaking for the past 1 year or thereabouts.
Okay, we're looking forward to that. I guess that's one of the hints that the FIRS boss did tell us about a week ago, that we can expect a new form of regulation for revenue. But just before we let you go, help us to understand the import duty suspension on those staple foods. How is it supposed to work? Because I spoke to a couple of people who are at border areas. Are they supposed to be able to bring in, for instance, bags of rice into the country through the land and the water without paying duties? What does it capture?
Yes, so the idea is, of course, I think perhaps the most pressing issue for us as a country now is inflation, because inflation has a way of making the poor even poorer and has a way of reducing your purchasing power, and it just makes mystery a commonplace for the people. So it's always the priority of government to address inflation head on. So some of the announcements that have been made recently are really from the fiscal side of government policy to try and complement whatever is being done already. by the other policy arms of government. And one of that is food. If you look at the CPI, that's the Consumer Price Index, if you look at the basket, which is really, without sounding too complicated, the average Nigerian household, when they earn income, where do they spend their money? That's what the basket is really all about. And it shows that Nigerians spend more than half of their income on food. About 52%. So the major driver of inflation is food inflation, which is over 40%. So what we have seen with the latest numbers of July inflation is that we saw a moderation. Prices are still going up, but the rate at which they're going up has declined by over 120 basis points on food. And because of that decline in food inflation, we've seen deceleration in the overall inflation numbers. So that's also a confirmation of the fact that you need a lot of fiscal intervention. I'm not saying that decline is due to the fiscal intervention around waivers, because that's only just taking off now. So the impact would only be felt by the time we see the numbers for August, but even more so the numbers for September, because there's a lead time between when you announce and implement policies and when they begin to permeate into the economy. So the idea is, if you look at that reduction in the rate of inflation increase for July, it's driven by the decline in prices of commodities like yam. We also saw the one around tomato. We saw pepper and a few others, whereas things like rice, things like beans remain very high. So you see on the list of the items on which government is granting full waiver of import duties include, brown rice. This is not for you to bring in refined rice. We want that refining to be done locally. So we also, in a way, create economic activities locally, reduce the pressure on the exchange rate to import those things. As well as we also see beans included. We see sorghum. We see millets. So those are the areas where prices remain elevated. By the time the waivers kick in, and the rates are as high as 30% on brown rice, for example, to 20% on beans. If you take that percentage off, the cost is significant. We expect to see something close to that in the retail price that people have to pay. And the way we also look at it is, if you really want to address food inflation, you don't have to open your border to all the food that you need to consume. That's why you see that list is quite few. And the idea being that if the price of yam, beans, rice, gari come down, there will be substitution effect on the other food products. So the person that would like to eat rice but cannot afford it now, they are eating yam, and yam is increasing demand and prices are going up. If the price of rice comes down, then they eat rice, and then you have less demand for yam, and the price of yam would also come down, even though you are not importing yam into the country. So that's the whole idea.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, for your time and your work. We're certainly looking forward to more implementation and, of course, the spillover effect, as you've said, in the economy and purchasing power for Nigerians, especially inflation. But thank you so much for your time, and do well done.
Thank you for having me.